Hi, welcome. My name's Steve. You're here at Self Generated, my online conversation podcast, web series, whatever you want to call it. We're a couple episodes deep into the exploration of human NPCs. If you missed the first episodes, I really advise you circle back. Recaps suck. Short version is those that we explore a handful of ideas of how humans work through active inference, embodied cognition, the extended mind. And as we explore that, we take some ideas of things that are in the world, like people that act like NPCs, and we look at how it feels weird, how their behavior sounds strange, how it's more than just a meme or a mean thing to say, and how it actually might be a reflection to how we actually function and work. What do I mean by that? How our consciousness, self, ideas, perceptions, beliefs, society, how all of this actually works by being a minded thing. Now, that might sound a little heady, like a little too much to take in, but I'm telling you, it's actually completely knowable. And most of the difficult parts is actually not knowing the new things and all the new stuff. It's just let going of the old bullshit. And when we talk about NPCs, they run on old bullshit. And what do I mean by that is when you really think about somebody who acts like an NPC, is that why they stand out is they act with groupthink. They just use very simple phrases. They're in the online echo chambers that we can all witness. That anytime somebody of their value for their group speaks, they have to come and clap. There's no actual thought as to what's being said. It's always, or it is continuously, and almost very rarely outside of this, the affirmation of whatever they already believe to be true. They're projecting what they need to be true out into the world. And that's one of the reasons that we have echo chambers, is this process of putting this out there and getting this affirmation back reaffirms this model of the world. And that's what our politics is boiled down to, in much of our society in some aspects. And that's why NPC behavior is kind of an interesting thing to look at, because it is a reflection of that, in my humble opinion. And if we see it through active inference, there might be something we can do about it, to understand that when you're trying to have these arguments with somebody, or if you're reading an argument, if you're online and you're trying to engage with somebody and you see that there's just no getting through to them, there's no logic, there's no rationale, there's no reason, and generally what comes back is mean spirited. And what we have is, in response, we feel is that this person is stupid, or they're not real, or they're messing with us, they're trolling. And the reality is, yes, they can be trolling you, but more importantly is it doesn't matter. Why are we so concerned about it? Because we can't change somebody else's mind. If you were paying attention to one of the prior episodes when we explored why this is even a thing, is that we believe that we have free will, 100% free will. And when you check it against reality, that doesn't necessarily add up. And that's one of the red flags that is noticeable in NPC behavior, is that seemingly misalignment with free will versus how we think it works. That the person seems to be lacking it because they don't seem to pause and be able to think. The words that they're saying are not true per our perception, per others' perception. And that doesn't seem to bother them. And so for what would be most people, or reasonable people, that kind of comes across as a little crazy or untrue or stupid, or any number of negative adjectives that you can throw out there. But the idea is that when it comes to our cognition and how we work, that does make sense. And that you shouldn't expect to be able to get an idea across to somebody. You shouldn't be able to change their mind in an argument. And there shouldn't be that expectation. And so to have that expectation, that belief, that need for another person to believe something, already kind of puts you behind the eight ball. Because you can't. Why? Because, well, to be frank, if you paid attention, you can do that for yourself. As I described, if I gave you all the evidence of a particular truth, to say you're an atheist, and I could prove that God exists definitively, scientifically, would you be able to go, oh yeah, makes sense, no problem, and have no hang-ups on it? No, because we don't have that type of free will. That doesn't exist for us, because we don't work in that way. And so why would one expect for another person to do that? If you are the player character and you can't do that, then why should an NPC do that? And why I'm stressing this is why the issue is, or Why I'm stressing this and why it's useful to you is because that is something you can have control over. And that if you're witnessing somebody having NPC-like behavior, you're not going to gain anything by trying to convince them, by trying to outsmart them, by trying to be clever and engaging with them. If you actually then genuinely believe, because you are getting upset, you are being driven to make these comments, you're doing the same thing. You're being an NPC too. You're needing them to believe something. You need them to believe what you're projecting to be true for you to be comfortable. All right, that's what I'm talking about with NPC-like behavior, is that we need the stories, the models of what we believe to be true. And we need to reinforce that via outside individuals reinforcing that for us by our comments, our echo chambers, who we follow. And then if we can't do that, if we can't change our minds, which most of the time we don't try to do, we take that signal, that thing that's like, hey, what is this? What is this threat here? And we minimize it. How? We demean it. The person who's saying it is stupid. The group is stupid. They're all a bunch of morons who don't understand what's going on. They're ignorant. They're cultish. All of those things minimize that threat. Because if they weren't cultish, if they were thinking, if they had things to say that actually reflected the truth, well then fuck, there is a threat there. And how do I deal with that? I would have to change how I think about things. Does that make sense? Now, if you can't get to a point where you're just comfortable allowing them to be a fucking NPC, let them be it. It is what it is. I had an old boss, Rafi, when I used to sell cars, and he said, you can fix a lot of things. So many things you can fix, but you can't fix stupid. And he's right. When somebody is set in their mind, especially now that I know, or what I believe I know about active inference, embodied cognition, and the extended mind, is you don't just change your mind. That's saying, just words, change your mind. How? How easy is that? Yes, sometimes you can just easily change your mind when it's something innocuous, but somebody you don't love them anymore. Don't hate that person anymore. Go do something that you have never wanted to do. Hold a spider in your hand if you're afraid of spiders. Walk a dog if you're afraid of dogs. It's not that simple. What I'm talking about is perhaps a way to actually literally do it. And what I'm saying is, in changing your mind, is being aware of how you experience other people, everything in your life. For example, people who act like NPCs. So people who you become frustrated with because you can't seem to be in the same wavelength with them. They're in another reality. Maybe you're a Harris supporter and they're a Trump supporter. Maybe you're a Trump supporter and they're a Harris supporter. Or maybe you're somebody who knows it's all bullshit. How do you all connect? How do you all get the other person to see what they need to see? Maybe you can't. But what you can do is get yourself to be able to handle the world in a better place. Get yourself and others around you to be able to see the world for how it is. And one of the best things you can do for that is not needing it to be something, and not needing other people to relate that to you, to reinforce that to you. Because that's what people who are doing this NPC-like behavior are. Like when you see the ideas of group speak, and that they're all saying the same thing, it's reinforcing their view of the world through these other people. The value of their model, their interpretation of what's happening, is increased greatly by the number of other people who are actively engaged in it. This makes sense. You don't go to a restaurant that's empty. You don't do anything. You don't feel as comfortable doing things without other people that are there already doing it and reinforcing it. That's just not a character flaw of being a person. That is fundamental to being a social animal that evolved through active inference and through hundreds of thousands of years of silent development before civilization, using the same literal physical type of matter. Nothing magical changed in our brains and in our bodies in the last 100,000 years, but we've fundamentally completely changed as a species because of how we model the world, how we communicate, how we store that communication, and the technology that we use has allowed us to refine how we model the world and how we work and how we understand it. It's very different than perhaps how you might think we work. And if that challenges you, that's fine. You don't have to believe what I say 100% is true. But if you need me to be wrong, if you need to commit acts of mental violence upon the idea and say how stupid and ignorant and how XYZ and you're a motherfucker and all this, when you do that, go ahead. All you do is prove I'm right. Meaning that you can't take for a moment and allow something else that has no challenge to you to exist. You feel to the point where you're compelled to share that negative idea, and that's the only thing that scratches that itch. That's NPC behavior. That's because your error signal is going off because you're seeing evidence that your beliefs of this world are not true. And that can't be. That can't be. That's a threat. That's a threat to your reality. And without any thinking about it, without just updating and realizing that that threat, that sensation of threat will go away when you update your model and you understand the world, we don't do that. You know why? Because we're not taught. We're not taught what actual thinking is, what changing your mind actually is. What the fuck is actually changing your mind? Changing your mind is changing your model. What do I mean is that if you believe that you're going to fail, yes, a lot of times you fail, but you feel like you're going to fail. Just as if you construct the belief that you're going to succeed, you have less strife when you're attempting to do things. It doesn't magically fucking mean that you're more apt to succeed, maybe statistically, but not magically. What it is your feeling of the situation is different because every single ounce of your experience is generated by what you believe. Everything. There's nothing outside of that. It's all generated based off of your interpretation of the world. That's how we model and exist. That's what active inference says. That's how all of these LLMs and all these other models exist. And when you pause and you look at actual human behavior, society, not just NPCs, that's why I'm doing this long form, long term exploration of this idea, is because anything that is part of being a minded thing, so all things cognition touches, so society, everything should have its fingerprints, including our behavior online and our behavior when it's kaflooey, aberrant salience, which explains psychosis and autism, which also explains it through active inference. All of these things, layer by layer, we're going to explore. We're going to be wrapping up in the next episode with NPCs, but in this one right now, your behavior and NPC's behavior is identical. The difference is the level, the amount of projection that one sees. We do this automatically. It's a reflection of active inference. It only comes out to a point when it's just like gets to an absurd, ridiculous point, in part, in no small part, due to the echo chambers of our online communities. Because that's what it is. When you think of being in an echo chamber and feeling good about these other people repeating these ideas that you already agree with, that's the idea of Facebook and all these online groups and MAGA and fanboydom and religion and so many things, and you're, oh, that's kind of funny, I wonder why that is. It's because it's actually how we work. Like when you make friends, it's not just because of the friend god came down to you and sprinkled friend dust, or that any other thing that other than people who sample the world the same as you, meaning people who see the world and reinforce your worldview. You don't have to be identical. They reinforce your worldview, make you happy. So if you're a heterosexual male and it's a woman and they make you feel like a man, that reinforces your model. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what your model is. If it reinforces your model, you guys sample the world together, you are more apt to be friendly with each other. We think of it as because of just race and religion and all these other things. And those are the labels that we use to identify differences. But it's not the cause. The cause is us, active inference, embodied cognition, and the extended mind. The cause is not understanding what we actually are, how we actually work. and being able to work within those differences. And that when push comes to shove, a lot of people act like a fucking character in a video game, not because they're stupid, they're very capable of something more, but because they are not taught how they actually work. And they're given this kind of borderline fairy tale with no useful information or tools, they do their best. They find other like-minded individuals who reinforce what they believe to be true, because that's how we work. And that's fine. But guess what? At what point did anybody hear, or did you notice I talk about actually looking at reality, dealing with things as they are, being able to do the right thing and what's best for us? Because none of those things are calculated. We would think they are if we were all doing rational things, sitting there calculating. We're not. We're emotional creatures handling what we don't even understand, which is our error signal from what we believe to be true. And that when you see NPCs, they're just needing to be a little louder in order to handle their error signal. And then it's a little bit more obvious. And it's always obvious when it's somebody else. It's very hard for us to see our own faults and flaws when we do it. But you can notice it if you're dealing with anything and you need it to be true. And there's going to be the jokers like, well, what if I'm going to die? We need to live. It doesn't matter. If you don't have control over anything, right? You don't have the control that you think you do. So when you're at a want of something to be in a place, it alters the way you can deal with it. That feels like that shouldn't be true because you're taught that you're an agent of free will. But our experiences show that we're not that way, not 100%, not that we can just snap it. And we don't even have the proper verbiage or the ways to look at it because we don't explore it. We explore in this dead end, is or isn't, in an NPC kind of way, at scale. That's how everything works. And that's where a lot of our suffering comes from. And when I discussed about NPCs so far and trying to get ideas across to them, and that you really can't. Unless you can get the person to pause and not be in that emotional state. And you're not going to do that by undermining them. You're not going to, by making them sound stupid, by pointing out how stupid they sound. And then all you do is you're your own fucking NPC on the other side. You see, just go to X, left and right. It's just regurgitation of people with thinking that they're talking about logical arguments of things that easily fall apart. None of these survive challenge. And this is the final aspect of this video, is that for you to be able to tell if it's true, is it just needs to be able to survive challenge. And what do I mean by that? Is like you can examine it and it can survive questions, and that you don't have to decide if it's right or wrong that very second. And if you can't live within that moment of this thing that's just a fucking idea, well then maybe you're the NPC. And that's not to make you feel bad, it's to make you wake up. If you prefer to be an agent of free will, well then try to engage in some of that will and stop the behavior that you do have control over. And one of the things you can do is stop, listen, think, and don't engage just arbitrarily, automatically with that first signal that you get. You're one step away from being an NPC. You're one step further past being an NPC. Why? Because you're actually thinking, you're engaging, you're instead of just doing what you're doing and then saying it was will, you're actually enacting your will. If that feels uncomfortable to you, watch this video again. We're going to be doing one more episode on NPCs, and then we're moving on to the next subject. I know a lot of this might have sounded a lot firm, a little straightforward, but that's just how it is. There's no sense in pussyfooting around this. If you want to get engaged, get help, figure these things out, engage. Self-generated podcast. I'm on X. If you don't message me, then maybe you don't have anything to say. I'm willing to talk. I'm willing to listen, and I believe my ideas can survive challenge. And I don't need you to be wrong. I don't need me to be right. I need you to be willing. Self-generated.